and she stepped aside from her honorary role with immediate effect. Reject it, Buckingham Palace, reject it. William, defend your godmother. Palace, I do not care if the palace goes down in flames. Reject it and reinstate her at once. And tell the world that you are giving her the benefit of the doubt. If you're going to fall, I would rather you fall with honour and dignity, not kowtowing and snivelling to the woke masses. Welcome to the broadcast, everybody. It's been a few days, and so I was planning to come to you today with something more gentle, more playful, more fun and uplifting, and then this dropped. And my heart is broken into a million pieces. I feel dismayed. I feel fearful about not just the state of the whole wide woke world, but also Buckingham Palace. They've got to grow, son. And it might be too late. I'm not furious with them for the same reasons that the press seem to be furious with them today, baying for royal blood. I'm furious that they've issued this snivelling, lily-livered apology because Lady Susan Hussey offended somebody who attended the reception that Camilla held at Buckingham Palace. Was it yesterday? She attended this gorgeous reception which went so well, and I've been watching video footage of it. But of course there had to be a spanner in the works, and it had to come from one of these wokies who has an archetypical view of the world. And their victimhood comes before everything else. And I speak as somebody who could very well view myself as a victim every day of my life, in every interaction, if I so wanted to. I speak as someone who, doesn't experience casual racism, systemic racism, and the repercussions of that. So I say that I proceed with that full understanding, but that isn't the only issue that faces bigotry out there. That isn't the only issue that is approached differently by various generations and is understood differently, generation to generation. And today we are discussing Lady Susan Hussey, who is 83 years old. And that's not to say that the views or the attitudes of every 83-year-old woman are antiquated, outdated, because they're certainly not. They can be utterly modern and as fruity as anybody else's. But when the gun is jumped to various conclusions to cancel a woman who gave 62 years of her life. Since 1960, Lady Susan worked for the Queen since the birth of Prince Andrew, all those decades. 62 years. Demolished overnight, cancelled, a victim of cancel culture. In the wake of the Queen's death, one of the loves of her life. She's the lady, if you didn't know, that accompanied the Queen to Philip's funeral. That's how tight they were. Lady of the bedchamber, woman of the bedchamber rather. Royal Household Long and Faithful Service Medal she received. She's the Dame Commander of the RVO, the Royal Victorian Order, a Dame, and she was promoted to the Dame Grand Cross of that order. She's godmother to William too. And she's been accused of a racist conversation, undertones of racism, white superiority. And because of that accusation, that seems to my mind not to take into account her background, her experience, and her generation, and her intention, which I believe was always good. None of that is an excuse for these wokies who just want to get onto social media, type it all out there, how traumatized they are by this conversation. I haven't had the experience that this woman of colour has had throughout her life. I haven't had her same lived experience, but I know and understand every day, and I'm telling you, every day is not an exaggeration, of the clumsiness or perceived clumsiness of those who are well-meaning. With me, it's in regards to what they perceive from someone who presents a little androgynously, what they perceive and assume with regards to that and my sexuality. You can imagine, every day of my life, from my youngest days to now, all through my life, including up to last week, I had a little experience with I have friends from all kinds of generations, and they say clumsy stuff all the time. Somebody said to me last week, I always thought you'd end up living in Brighton, because apparently during the I don't know, 80s or 90s, it was a mecca in the United Kingdom for the gays. Despite the fact that I rarely hang out with gays. And, you kind of roll your eyes inwardly and have a giggle, but, it's this assumption that they make that because they see you as a certain way, your life will be a certain way. And, this person wasn't aware that nowadays it's offensive. People will often say to me, oh, I used to work with a queer. I've met kinds like you before. I used to work with a queer. I could take it upon myself to be so offended by that. Well, how dare you assume, or how dare you other me, or and they will ask the most personal questions. Personally, my attitude is that I really find it quite refreshing. I prefer people to speak as they find, even if it is clumsy, even if it does seem like a bit of an interrogation. I don't need to clutch my pearls and go running to social media to dob them in and create a witch hunt to the point that they feel that they have to resign from a job. I mean, where is this woman's compassion? Where is this woman's compassion? Her name... And by the way, as far as I'm concerned, these are all piranhas feeding on the crumbs that Harry and Meghan left them after that Oprah Winfrey interview. Feeding off those crumbs. Ngozi Fulani. Mixed feelings about yesterday's visit to Buckingham Palace. 10 minutes after arriving, a member of staff, Lady S.H., believed to be Susan Hussey. This has not been confirmed. The identity has not been confirmed at the time of recording by any of these parties, but she's used the initials S.H. and she's been named throughout media as Susan Hussey. Approached me, moved my hair to see the name badge. Oh, shock horror, shock horror. Have we really come to the point now where somebody takes umbrage and feels personally violated by their space? Where an 83-year-old woman comes and moves your hair out the way to see your name badge. Get a life. Get over it. No, I don't feel sympathy for you. No, I don't believe that you were traumatised, and if you were, grow some. The conversation below took place. The rest of the event is a blur. And her version of the conversation has been corroborated by various people that she attended with who all thought that it was terrible, this conversation. And I notice under this lady's Twitter post, she had a message from Vice magazine, of all people. Vice magazine. I'm a senior news reporter at Vice. I'd be very happy to talk to you more about what happened, see what response I can get from the palace. And Sister Space, which is the organisation that this lady works for, says, please contact media at Sister Space. So very eager for more media there, because they need to get it out to the world, don't they? How awful the royal family are. And let's remember, this isn't even a member of the royal family we're talking about here. This is an employee, and not even a paid one. Where are you from? Asked Lady Hussey. Sister Space. No, where do you come from? We're based in Hackney. No, what part of Africa are you from? I don't know. They didn't leave any records. Well, you must know where you're from. I spent time in France. Where are you from? Here, UK. No, but what nationality are you? I am born here and am British. No, but where do you really come from? Where do your people come from? My people, lady, what is this? Oh, I can see I'm going to have a challenge getting you to say where you're from. When did you first come here? Lady, I am a British national. My parents came here in the 50s. I knew I'd get there in the end. You're Caribbean. No, lady, I am of African heritage, Caribbean descent and British nationality. Oh, so you're from... yada yada. So, yes, I understand and can see that if this is verbatim what was said, I can see it's clumsy. I can see how it would rankle. I can see if you're of a delicate nature, or even perhaps some people who are more robust might bristle a bit at this feeling of interrogation. But what I object to is taking it all out of proportion, giving no benefit of the doubt whatsoever, and choosing to resolve this not by having a conversation, not by writing a letter, but to take to social media to cancel the livelihood of an 83-year-old who was given years of service, and thinking the worst, just jumping to think the worst, that, above all things, above her intentions, above her experience with members of the Commonwealth, accompanying the Queen all these decades, above anything else, it's her feelings, it's this woman's feelings, and the fact that she feels so violated that count above everything. I, throughout my life, if I'd wanted to go down that path, You know, I could have been the darling of the HR, the woke HR departments of various establishments and organisations through the years. I could have had so many people sacked, brought up for disciplinary hearings, for breaching all kinds of rules and regulations and guidelines about what you can say and what can't say, and what words you can use and what you can't use. But guess what? I don't want to live in that clown world. So I don't go down that path, you know, unless something really truly and utterly seriously demeaning and cruel was taking place, and that I was truly being victimised. And, you know, there are times when I've brushed things under the carpet just because I've thought I would rather they say their mind, say their piece, and so I know who they are, than force society to shut its trap and not make conversation and not do its best, however clumsily it's doing it. You know, lose the ability to have any kind of humour in the world, any kind of interaction. You know, I would wager that Lady Susan Hussey would do the same, regardless of complexion, regardless of nationality. Where in England are you from? No, which town? I know where about. You know, these people take an interest. They take an interest. It's not to be seen as an interrogation. And yes, upper class people, in common with lower class people actually, can be very direct, very blunt. You know, they say what instead of pardon. Upper and the lower classes just get to it. And to be honest, it's something I really rather appreciate. It's about an attitude that one takes to the world. And if you know, to go through life with the attitude that this woman has, she thinks the most constructive thing to do is to go rip this woman to shreds on social media. It breaks my heart for the state of the world. And it breaks my heart that Buckingham Palace responded with an apology. In a statement, Buckingham Palace said, "We take this incident extremely seriously and have investigated immediately to establish the full details. In this instance, unacceptable and deeply regrettable comments have been made. We have reached out to Ngozi Fulani on this matter and are inviting her to discuss all elements of her experience in person if she wishes." I'll get a life. In the meantime, the individual concerned would like to express her profound apologies for the hurt caused. She will be devastated at what has occurred today. Devastated that this will affect the name of the royal family on the eve of the Boston excursion by the Walesers. And she stepped aside from her honorary role with immediate effect. Reject it, Buckingham Palace, reject it. William, defend your godmother. Palace, I do not care if the palace goes down in flames. Reject it and reinstate her at once. And tell the world that you are giving her the benefit of the doubt for 62 years' experience. Screw the reputation of the royal family. If you're going to fall, I would rather you fall with honour and dignity, not kowtowing and snivelling to the woke masses, because most people out there, the silent majority, will understand, as they understood with the alleged bigoted comments mentioned on Oprah Winfrey, that no harm was meant and that understanding on both sides wouldn't go amiss. A little compassion on both sides wouldn't go amiss. All members of the household are being reminded of the diversity and inclusivity policies, as if they need another reminder, which they are required to uphold at all times. Well, does that diversity extend to upper-class white women as well? A bit of understanding about them, various generations, or does it only extend to certain minorities, certain parts of that diversity? It's very uneven-handed, in my estimation. Very uneven-handed. I think it's an absolute scandal and a disgrace that her resignation has apparently been accepted. That whole statement from Buckingham Palace was unacceptable, in my point of view. Unacceptable. The opening statement on Ngozi Fulani's website says, "My parents came to London from the Caribbean and most of their children were born here." So that would have been quite a reasonable answer to give. But, you know, she has the right not to have to divulge that kind of information. Yes, she absolutely has the right to just say, "I'm British." Let's leave it at that. But she could have just said what her website said. "My parents came to London from the Caribbean." Would have been quite simple. But that would have been kowtowing to the inquisition of a white old woman who thinks that she's superior to me, wouldn't it? So she couldn't have just done that. They had to go through this whole dance. 83 years old, and she's expected to be up to date on the latest microaggressions that can't be uttered, conversations that you're not allowed to have. You are not allowed to ask anyone where they're from anymore. You are not allowed to ask. But when you really look at things going on now, you're not allowed to ask much other than what do you think of the weather? And even that's probably problematic. She said, standing there in a room packed with people while this violation was taking place was so strange, especially as the event was about violence against women. There was nobody to report it to. Now I see. We're not dealing with a Ngozi. We're dealing with a Karen. Who can I report this to? I'm violated. There was no one to report it to. I couldn't report it to the Queen Consort. Plus, it was such a shock to me and the other two women that we were just stunned to temporary silence. I just stood at the edge of the room, smiled and engaged briefly with who spoke to me until I could leave. And one of the witnesses, it must be said, Mrs. Reid, who is the first person of colour to lead a national party in British history, tweeted that she had also heard the exchange. I was right there. I witnessed this firsthand. We were at an event that was supposed to celebrate our work. For people like us will never really belong here. And, it's moving when you hear those kind of words. And no one wants to think that anybody goes to these things and feels unwelcome. One really doesn't. And perhaps if it had been portrayed in a different way, if the conversation had been reported in a different way, then I would have more sympathy. But going on her own account, her own script, her own dialogue of that conversation, going on that alone, I see clumsiness. I see an old-fashioned approach, perhaps, to conversation. But I think it takes the most delicate of egos, which sadly seem to be becoming ubiquitous these days, the most delicate of the egos to view that as the intense, cruel violation that it is being represented as. If Ngozi Fulani has some valid points to make, which she may well do, why isn't she now saying, now listen, I wanted a conversation, I didn't want to end the livelihood? I'm sorry, it's inhumane. It's inhumane. In a new tweet, Sister Space says, thanks everyone for their support. It's not our wish to reveal the person involved, it is the system that needs to be revised. Yes, the person was offensive, but it serves no purpose to name and shame her. It would make us just as bad. We prefer that this be handled kindly. Well, that's all very well and good, and I appreciate those words, but when she transcribed the conversation, she did it using the initials SH, and the name has already leaked in profusion. But there is absolutely no getting away from the fact that this all ties into this ideology that the archetypical types out there have. The ones that you see on Meghan's podcast, Harry's crew, seeking out with this ruthless antenna, seeking out besmirchments of all kinds, being completely unable to look past any language that isn't immaculate and completely and utterly innocuous and inoffensive, completely unable to look past that and just see the person as a well-rounded, well-meaning, fruity figure. What sort of soulless avatars do the likes of Harry and Meghan want in this world? Well, you can see one of them for sure in Meghan, and Harry is quickly turning into that type too, if he hasn't already. Soulless avatars. Sound and fury, told by an idiot. Sound and fury signifying nothing. So I will end this broadcast, which turned into a rather serious one today, I'm afraid, but I will end it by saying that, yes, I understand that I'm not a woman of colour. I haven't had that lived experience, and so you might not think that I am qualified enough to speak on such a conversation. Well, I actually disagree, because there are different forms of prejudice and bigotry out there, and different assumptions that are made about many of us. Many of us. And I certainly, as you can imagine, experience that a lot. And I understand how one has to develop a certain BS meter, if you like, a certain meter And it takes really quite a lot in 2022 for someone to hit a 10 out of 10 on the BS meter, or I don't really know how to put it, to hit a 10 out of 10 on the offensive scale. Should we put it that way? Because 9 times out of 10, most people who come out with clumsy conversation are doing their best and should be treated as if they are people, humans doing their best, not as if they are cruel morons, because that's such a jaded, selfish way to go through life. Perhaps Ngozi Fulani has encountered people throughout her life that deserve this sort of takedown. It is my belief that Lady Susan Hussey is not one of those people. I have a good mind to write to Buckingham Palace today to demand that the resignation of Lady Susan Hussey is rejected, and that she is invited back into the fold, where she has earned her stripes ad infinitum and where she belongs. The royal family will not win this game by pandering to this sort of sham. They won't, because more complaints like this will come out of the woodwork every single week, every single day. What are they going to do? Fire off apologies and lay off staff until there's absolutely no one left but the king? And then even he gets cancelled. It's not going to work. Grow some, grow a pair. Stand up for yourselves. Stand up to this culture of incessant victimhood and cancel culture, or you will fall victim to it too in time. You've had your warning. I thank you for your company, and I look forward to seeing you in the next broadcast. My tip jar is in the description box below. Cheerio!